5 till the hour here in the Imus Morning Program. One of Congressman Daryl Issa's favorite songs, El Tone. All right. Coming up a little bit, Craig Crawford, and talk to him. And then one of the more famous trial lawyers in the country, David Boies, who's out there representing, involved with Ted Olson in a gay marriage situation in California. And I got interested in that, and I like David Boies. And so we're going to talk to him about that. Congressman Daryl Issa serves as a ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, also serves on the House Judiciary Committee. He lives in Vista, California with his wife, daughters, and all that sort of thing. Please welcome to the program Congressman Daryl Issa. Good morning, Congressman Issa.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for having me on. And thanks for mentioning I do live in California with my wife, even if it's only on weekends.
Where is Vista?
You know where Camp Pendleton is?
I was in the Marine Corps station there.
Okay, well, Camp Pendleton is surrounded by Oceanside, by San Clemente, and by Vista, and I'm the Vista part of it. We border the Marine base, and that Marine base is the center of my district.
I used to go into Oceanside with a fake ID and get drunk. So.
Yeah, well, they called it Hill Street then. I'm afraid they've changed it to Pacific Coast Highway to protect your reputation.
Okay, well, good. So tell me about this hearing you're having today.
Well, you know, like it is so often, you know, it's not the failure of government. It's not what they did wrong. It's the cover-up. And in this case, we've discovered a pattern that the Fed, New York Fed in this case, and then eventually the entire Fed with Bernanke, they had a pattern of not telling us what they were doing, even not telling their own Fed chairman in other areas what they were doing. Well, they were getting Congress to give them, you know, the $700 billion. And in this case, they paid 100 cents on the dollar for basically insurance policies that were worth virtually zero at the time, and then covered it up so we wouldn't know that they paid what it is by anyone's stretch of the imagination, far more than you or I would have paid if we'd walked in to bail out the banks.
So why? I'm trying to follow this. Why did they pay? Why did they pay so much more than these things were worth? Was that part of the bailout or what?
Yeah, I've called it a backdoor bailout. When you look at banks in France, and of course Goldman Sachs, we know well, getting over $10 billion that they never have to pay back. You know, we all concentrate on, well, you know, are they getting bonuses now that they paid us back what they borrowed with interest? That's not the story. It's never been the story. The real story is, why did we underwrite insurance policies from a bankrupt insurance company that gave many banks, in total over $62 billion worth of never have to return backdoor bailout? This is the story, is the money that we'll never see back, not the money they borrowed and paid back.
How did you discover they were doing this?
Well, it's not because they wanted us to. They technically talked about these various investments, and what they did was they carefully hid, even from their own governors, they hid the fact that they were paying 100 cents on the dollar. And, of course, what they also hid was that it was clear that many people within the Fed system were telling them why they didn't need to pay that much or pay anything. But Chairman Bernanke ignored it. Treasury Secretary now, but New York Fed Chairman Geithner at the time, on one hand, he's the guy running the Fed that takes credit for stopping the meltdown. And on the other hand, as of November 24th, he has told us through his attorney that he was recused and wasn't doing anything related to it. The problem is he didn't resign, so he was still there. So if he wasn't doing it, who did he leave to tend the knitting, if you will, of $60+ billion of your money?
So if they didn't need to buy these things, then where did the money go? Who got the money?
Well, and the largest bank in France got $14 billion. Every bank, the large bank that you know, both here and around the world, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and so on, they all got a piece of it. And the amazing thing is, you know, if Goldman Sachs hadn't gotten this backdoor bailout, they would have borrowed more money. No question. If the insurance policy they bought on risky schemes didn't pay, they would have had to come and borrow more money. The difference is, of course, borrowed money, Goldman Sachs can pay back. Given money, they don't have to pay back.
Well, whose pocket did this money eventually wind up in?
That's the best question, and that we don't have yet. What we have is a table of some very interesting numbers that have been redacted and sealed until 2018. by request to the Fed through AIG that would show us what these instruments are and ultimately who got paid the money. Because even though it went to these banks, in many cases it continued on. It might have gone circular back to Goldman Sachs, or it might have gone to somebody else in some other country. We don't know because they've never told us, and they don't want to tell us.
Maybe you'll find this out as you found out all this other stuff. These emails, by the way, Geithner's emails, how'd you manage to find those?
Well, after New York chairman of this committee, Ed Towns, actually granted a subpoena. They would not give it to us without a subpoena. We got about 250,000 documents, which, if you know the way lawyers work, what they did was they gave us too much, hoping we wouldn't find it, but they only gave us about a third of the time frame. So we still have a small amount of the time frame, but they buried us with documents, and thanks to modern technology, we were able to scan through and get a little more than you usually would in just a couple of days out of this.
I wonder what this means. We're talking with Congressman Darrell Issa from California. He's the ranking member of the House Oversight Government Reform Committee. It's coming up on 18 till the hour. I wonder what this means. That I don't know, pretend to know much about this at all. And anything I want to know about business news, I ask the people who heard Fox, and they seem to know a lot about it, Fox Business. But I wonder why I'm not surprised about any of this.
Well, the reason you're not surprised is that anything that is done, quote, in secret, usually they cover up, they tell you about their good deeds and they cover up their mistakes. That's why our committee exists. It's the biggest question we have today for Tim Geithner is, you were with the Fed, now you're with the Treasury. There's a whole lot of talk about giving you not just the power you already had to do things like this, but more power without disclosure. Do the American people trust one person, the Fed chairman, perhaps operating without telling anyone else, and they're all unelected, but without telling anyone else? Do we trust them with even more of your money? And understand, they already have trillions of ability to do, but now they're talking about being able to take over corporations that aren't even banks. And that's a lot of what we want to do, is discover if this reorganization of America to give this organization more money in secret is really appropriate, considering how they did it the last time when they had a blank check from the American people.
Here's what I'm wondering, how the guy there's a guy didn't pay his taxes, essentially, and still got confirmed as, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it goes back to this amazing thing. He has to be smart enough to be the Treasury Secretary and dumb enough not to be able to run TurboTax. He's been able to thread that needle. You and I probably would fail at both.
Congressman Darrell Issa here on the Imus Morning Program, 17 until the hour. Well, Bernanke's staff recommended that he not bail out AIG, I'm told.
Absolutely.
And there are documents supporting that, but you can't get your hands on them, right?
No, I can't. The amazing thing is those were delivered, we've been told by a whistleblower, over to the Senate Banking Committee on the condition they not tell anyone. Meantime, we have a subpoena asking about AIG, and we can't find out that Bernanke hid, and we don't have all the details, but Bernanke hid from the other regional Fed chairman the very idea that his staff had recommended, let him go bankrupt, we can cover any systemic risk in other ways. It never got before the Fed meeting, and of course, we were told to do the TARP, it was never mentioned to us. In fact, it was hidden from Congress, and it was hidden from even members of the Fed.
So the net here, what do you think will happen? Let's say you get all the information you all want, and you get half of the documents and stuff you want. So what's the net effect here? What happens to Geithner, Bernanke, all that?
Well, first of all, all we can do is shed light on things. Yeah. One of the things about being the minority is that if you push hard enough, sometimes you get a hearing and you get documents and you shed light, and then public opinion helps you do the rest. But what we're really trying to do is slow down this whole idea that the Fed is infallible and you need to give more. It's in fact only as good as the individuals, and if there isn't any second-guessing procedure, then we just have to hope these are infallible individuals. There's no question that we have support by many Democrats who have joined with us and said, hold it. Even if we have to blame the previous administration and kind of ignore this administration, we do have to talk about the fact that the Fed is not infallible, and that this cleanup back in September, October, November of last year, there were mistakes made, and we're not sure we want to give any organization the authority without coming to Congress to make those kinds of decisions again. And so Dennis Kucinich, Marcy Kaptur, even Elijah Cummings, we have a number of people who want answers on a bipartisan basis, and that feels pretty good in this environment to have people on both sides who care enough to want to make sure we slow down this train.
That's a weird dude, isn't it, Dennis Kucinich?
It's a very strange situation when Dennis Kucinich and Marcy Kaptur, heads of the Progressive Caucus, and Congressman Darrell Issa and Patrick McHenry and Ron Paul all are on the same side. But it does show you that some things about not trusting government, you should believe both sides when they say, be a little careful and make sure there's checks and balances. And, you know, particularly there in New York, where on one hand people are talking about how we have to have checks and balances on the banks, we're talking and saying, wait a second, we have checks and balances on ourselves, too, because a lot of what happened last year was generated by activities of government, and hopefully we can slow down the process of just blaming the banks and ignoring lots of other areas of fault.
Guess you're all jacked up about the State of the Union tonight, huh?
We are. This is the first chance after a year for the president to come before us and say, I got a message that wasn't my own election. And if he got the message, which wasn't that they were ready to hire Republicans in Massachusetts, that on a regular basis that won't happen, but they certainly were ready to stop the Democrats from going too far. And if the president sees that, and if he's actually reaching out for the first time in my tenure with him, we're going to be very receptive. I don't expect it. I haven't yet seen it, but I believe in the redemption of souls, and I'm just hoping that what he wants to do is protect his legacy more than he wants to run an agenda that I don't think the American people support.
Well, we have information from an article in the New York Times that the president is going to accept responsibility, which I was greatly relieved to learn it wasn't my fault, one. And two, but he's not going to accept blame. You're not one of those guys that hang, like Jesse Jackson Jr. hangs on the aisle there and for hours just so he can shake his hand when he comes in, are you?
No.
Okay.
No, in fact, I'll probably still be tied up with this hearing until the last minute.
Will you be wearing a red tie?
No, I've got.
Okay, well, good. Well, then you pass muster.
And don't forget to look for Sheila Jackson Lee. She's always been great. She put a lip lock on President Bush a few times.
All right, man. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon.
Congressman Darrell Issa here on the Imus Morning Program. 12 minutes till the hour.